Nicole is the COO for Dudley DeBosier. So thank you so much for being here today, Nicole.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
That's great. Regardless of your firm size, when you're deploying an enterprise software platform, it's no easy feat. And so you may have done that in other places in your organization, or you've worked on that. And I'm sure some of you are prospects. We have clients who are in implementation, and we have clients who have been with Litify for some time now. You know that this is a never-ending, or hopefully know that this should be a never-ending process for you. The larger your organization, the more challenges that you'll face and the more complexities that you'll face when it comes to change management, training processes, changing old school processes and making sure that people understand the value. It just becomes more and more complex, right? And so you have to deploy the right tactics at the right time. And I think that Nicole is really in a unique position, or she was with her firm, to really understand, in her role as COO, to understand the needs of the entire organization. And like other software implementation projects, you can have this run by your IT department or run by marketing or whatever you might do. But I think, Nicole, you were in a unique position to really understand everyone at the org and what their needs were, to help them come alongside you. And in 20 years of consulting, I haven't seen that done well very often. And I would say that you really great job. And we're laughing because they're maybe just a month out from going live. So I don't think your hair's still a little bit on fire. And yeah. So maybe can you tell us a little bit about Dudley DeBosier?
Yeah, so I am the Chief Operating Officer at Dudley DeBosier. We're a firm of 200. We have 6 different locations. We're kind of spread out all across Louisiana, headquartered in Baton Rouge, where the majority of our staff members work from each day. So, we had previously been a firm that was on needles. 3 years ago, we went through a software implementation, a software that we actually helped design and create. And then now here we are. This is week 5 of our Litify org being live, being launched. And so had kind of a tall order with this project, right? Just 3 years ago, we went through another software change, and I was eager not to replicate that experience for our user group, right? That had been a difficult transition. And so I was really passionate about us doing everything that we could to make sure that this was a much smoother process, that our users felt heard, advocated for, and that we had provided solutions that would allow them to be functional, if not already better, from launch day, from go live day. And so that was the tall order that I had for the project. And I was able to partner with Litify and then Banjax to achieve that.
So why did you have to change again? What made to achieve your operational goals? Why did you go from needles to a custom program to Litify?
Our custom program went through a lot of iteration in the last year as we were preparing to move away from it, which I think is funny and just want to point that out. But that solution really, hindsight, felt like it was designed more for reporting, right? The reporting of the management, and as opposed to the user experience. And so with Litify, I think we're able to solve for that, and then also eventually provide a user experience that helps with the art of practicing law. We used to have kind of a cheat sheet that people would rely on for our previous software, and it was sort of like, where do I have to put data so that it falls to the reports so that I'm not in trouble, or so that I know who to call again, that type of stuff. And I'm happy now to be on a Salesforce-based platform where really we can not only scale, but we can solve for reporting, we can solve for the user experience, and again, blend the art of practicing law with the science of software, essentially, in a better way than we were previously able to.
So how did you know Salesforce, or how did you come to know what you know today to be able to sort of proficiently navigate the platform and communicate effectively so that your team, like within the first week of go live, was able to articulate objects and list views and all of the things that we want them to be able to do to feel like they own it?
So my previous background with Salesforce was very limited. I used to work in the sales world, hotel sales, and so my only experience was on a platform called Delphi. And so I had worked in that some years back, so had a very limited and basic knowledge of the power of Salesforce. In preparation for the project, I put myself through the admin trails that are on the Trailhead site. And that was really important because it helped me to learn how to build partnerships with Banjax and Litify so that I could properly advocate for my firm in the process and come to a solution that was successful. So the Trailhead trails were very important, just to develop my own understanding of the power of it, how to be a successful Litify admin, which will be a daily journey, of course, going forward. But that was very important to me to, I'm not an IT person, I'm an operations person. And so I wanted to be able to speak the different languages that I would be required to speak for this project to be successful. And I think that was immensely important.
So I know it's weird, but how do I know if questions come in from the audience? Will they show up on the screen, or am I going to ask of the audience? Okay. All right, so I'll go with one more, and we'll keep working then. Okay. So how did you approach the Litify project, keeping operations in mind and the day-to-day of running your business?
So, challenging, obviously, is when we first started the project, I was director of operations, moved into the COO role this past year. And so I had my real job, right? Which thankfully meant that I was in the weeds of the different departments, whether it was intake or reception or accounting or across the board, right? So I came into the project with a basic knowledge of how every department or user group inside my firm was operating. And then from there, we started meeting with each department on a weekly basis to make sure I fully understood their needs. Banjax really partnered with me in that. I have our Banjax project manager over here, Grammer, say hello. They were really vital, instrumental in us making sure we had a comprehensive understanding of how things were being done in the different departments. We've got a lot of archaic processes because we're a law firm. And so we had not only kind of archaic or processes that we could begin to grow out of just because it's 2022, right? But beyond that, we had a lot of workarounds that we had created in order to be successful in the software we have been running on until our launch 5 weeks ago. And so we had our work cut out for us, understanding, in the shadows, the departments were doing this and that to work around the current software, which created, just an interesting tangled web of processes to understand what do we need to just continue to allow to exist as far as processes go, and we'll deal with post-go live, versus what could we kind of rip the Band-Aid off in the go live process. So it just discovery, and I feel like we're still discovering 5 weeks into our launch. But yeah, it was very important that, I've talked to different firms who have designated an IT person or designated a chief financial officer, or just various firms do it. They do it different ways. They choose that person who will be their product owner. For Dudley DeBosier, I think it was the right move for us to put someone operational in that position.
That makes sense. I think that one thing that stuck out from LitiQuest last year, there was a speaker that talked about, Litify is not magic. If you implement the software, it's not going to change your life and change your firm. You really need to have the right team of people, a really bright team of people that are going to invest their time and talents to be able to bring this to fruition, right? And just interjecting the needs of everybody in the organization, but also being willing to say it's going to be different, and you have to help people understand how is that really going to benefit them? How do you bring them into the fold so that they understand what you're doing is going to make a positive difference for the company?
Yeah, so I think I didn't properly answer your question a minute ago, but just to kind of piggyback on it and to speak to what you're saying now, it was very important to me that we built a successful internal partnership with our user group, right, with each of the different departments from the kickoff of the project, and then that we also figured out how to build a successful partnership with both Banjax and Litify. And that's, I guess, how I would define success. I do think we did a good job with that, especially on the internal user group side. like I said, in that discovery, can you hear me? In that discovery process, we were consistently using Salesforce terminology, Litify terminology, right? So I was learning, like I said, it was important to me to go through the trails so that I could speak, or on a very basic level, Salesforce and Litify, and translate that to the users, right? And then back to Litify, back to Banjax, so that we could try to come up with the proper automation or the proper flow from the beginning, right? Instead of there being misunderstandings because I didn't bother to learn the right language in order to speak correctly Litify. And that was important, so taking ownership, there's no substitute for the work, and this project has proven that. It was very important for us to be extra careful with our users, teach them the vocabulary from day one. We've had them, in the org during the build, essentially. We didn't get our licenses active until May, but once we got them active, we went through 12 weeks of demoing and then moving into training, and I owned that process. And it was just very important to build that level of trust with the different departments, right? And to set their expectations. So just like you said, it's not magic, right? It's software. It's very technical, and it does what we tell it to do, right? So learning how to speak correctly to it and work correctly within it was very important. But on the user side, letting them know, we do expect there to be pain points, right? We expect you guys to be challenged by this process. When your phone updates, I get frustrated just from that, right? And that's so simple. Usually nothing changes, much less, to move to a completely different case management software. We've got people who still want to just rely on Word for everything, and so moving them to such a powerful system, spreadsheeted-based system, is a really big deal. And I think that we were able to teach them. I know you've said, like in the training process, you were happy to hear our users speak back to me with questions using the words like list views and objects and things like that. And so we put a lot of emphasis on kind of forcing adoption, I guess, even during the build to some extent.
Yeah, you could see users saying, it wasn't that the system was broken, it was, there must be a permission issue or something,
Yeah.
right? They understood that it was just, it was something that could be solved. And the coolest thing was we would be in the middle of these demos or in these training sessions, and Grammar would say, refresh your screen, and it would be like magic, right? And people would be like, you could just see people that were saying like, we don't have to wait like days and months and years, right, to get something to work for us, that this is something that is iterative, and that, like you said, this is something that is not going to it's not a point in time, right? This isn't a solution that you just, close the books, do an after-action review, and say, okay, we're done with this project, let's move on to something else, right?
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, we also have been maybe over-communicative at times about the reality, right? We have to bring over this legacy system into Litify, and so now, for however many months, we're going to be living in this sort of hybrid situation where, like I said, old processes that I fully intend to make obsolete in the future, they still exist right now, right? And so we have to kind of adjust and then begin to really clean it up and move, more forcefully into Litify itself and kind of say goodbye to the legacy system. And so we kind of we've been very, very open about that. Like, you're not living in the full expression of Litify. This is a hybrid. We've got to deal with the legacy stuff, legacy processes, and it's going to continue to change. And that was the thing, is like emphasis on, this is a culture of iteration from now on. That's what we are.
All right, Nicole, so somebody asked here, what are the biggest gotchas that you experienced, the things that you didn't know because you didn't know? That was one of my questions.
Is this sort of a what would you do differently type of a thing? I would say at the very beginning of your project launch, I think it's important to put some time into understanding who does what. So if you have a third-party service company that's working with you, and then you've got Litify working with you, and then internally you're trying to develop some sort of support system within your own firm to help this project be successful, I think taking a minute to properly define the expectations, who is doing what, and more than that, who is responsible for doing what, right? Because the lines get blurred. You cross over, somebody's doing this, and it is a challenging project, right? Because we've got 2 or 3 different companies working on it. We're in different time zones, sometimes different countries. And so it just that. I mean, think of how hard it is to schedule depots and mediations, right? Much less meetings with companies whose employees exist all across the country or even, internationally. So properly understanding that from the beginning and figuring out a plan for how to handle that and how to manage the project is, I wish I had done that a little bit better, I think.
I don't think you could have done that, honestly.
Thanks, Carissa. You're sweet.
So here's a good question, and something that we were talking about but hadn't gotten to the numbers. But the question is, how big is your firm? And I think what we could do is talk about who was involved in the first iteration. Was this, we did intakes and then matters, or did you do full-blown? What did your implementation look like and why? What's the size of the firm?
We have 204 users. We have 57 attorneys, 57 legal assistants, trial department, accounting, and we accounted for all of that in the build of the org, right? We do our medical records internally and our intake internally, and so this was quite a tall order. We had to provide functionality, fields, all the works for every single department in order to launch this 5 weeks ago. And we were successful in that we are taking intakes and we can disperse, right? So overarching definitions of success, I think we've met them, we've achieved them. There's a lot of work to do, but yeah, I do hear of firms that kind of launch in segments, right? But we launched a full scale org to include mass tort and just everything. So that should help you understand. That means meetings with accounting, mass tort, reception, medical records, every week, right? For the life cycle of this project, sometimes more than once a week. Discovery, understanding just the nitty-gritty of every process, and it was a big deal. And then when we started going into the demo phase, that lasted about 5 weeks, 6 weeks, and then on into training, legitimate training, where I'd have them logged in on one screen, I'm on Zoom on the other screen. Grammer and I are training, but making them be in the org with us while we do that.
Yeah, I have 1.5 years to build, 9 weeks of demos. So these are Zoom sessions, 1 hour, 30 minutes, 45 minutes with every group, iterating on what's been built, and then going back again when they fix something to run through it again to make sure, and then full-on training, creating training videos, documentation. It was like the full gamut for your team, right?
It was, yeah. And, I made the decision that we would handle training internally. So we did not rely on Litify for training resources other than, access to the Learning Hub and things like that. And I did that because, we have created a culture at Dudley DeBosier where, taking care of the team. And what that meant to me was that I was responsible for the birth of this, right? I wanted them to feel, I didn't want too much, generic training. I wanted it to be, this is how our org works. And so I really committed to that process, which was exhausting, but also I think meaningful. And I think it gave our users a sense of security, our management understands the software. They're building it with us. It's a group effort. We're all kind of birthing this org together.
Yeah, I think so. Let's see. We have a question here about, this is about buy-in, right? Mm-hmm. So really, what's in it for me kind of question. Mm-hmm. We've had problems with buy-in because a lot of new Litify functionality requires staff to enter data that doesn't help them directly. Mm-hmm. How will you, since we're in week 5, right? What are your thoughts around that?
I do think, that's a challenge that we face too. Like I said, we wanted to launch with something that didn't take us backward in any way, even though we still, like I said, we have to account and live with our legacy system. Thankfully, our legacy system left some to be desired, right, for every single user group that used it. And so it wasn't as if we were forcing them from a system they really loved into something totally unknown. So we had that going for us. But, still a lot of pain points because it's very different, right? Mm-hmm. The look of the two softwares are just very different, right? I love Excel. I will always choose to work in Excel over any other type of application, but that is not how the rest of our firm feels, right? Like they want to do medical summaries in Word, right? Not in Excel. And so that posed a challenge for me right off the bat. The look of it, a list view is essentially a spreadsheeted view, right? Which I love. And now we're kind of forcing adoption of that. But yeah, buy-in, it's a challenge for me right now, right? We're in week 5, and when a certain functionality has been broken by something else we did to achieve something for one team, right? Because this is what happens. Then that pretty quickly diminishes, buy-in. And that's our challenge right now in week 5. Although what saves it, what keeps putting us back on top, I think, is the fact that the partnership with Banjax and then how Litify has been so responsive, and then my own attitude consistently show the users, no, we are committed to getting this right for you. We are working on it as fast as we can. That's our commitment. And I really emphasize that during the entire build. We are partnering with you. We're not going to ignore your needs, and we're not going to give you a garbage solution just because that's easiest for us. It really is about the team. And like I said, they've never yet had a software that really supported litigation, right? You hear a lot, this is a software, I have to put data in here so the reports are good so that my pod doesn't get in trouble. But my end goal for the org, I hope that they're going to see a software really can support the art of practicing law.
That's really interesting. I think, one thing I wanted to bring up, it's not one of the questions that we talked about, but I was thinking about how you deployed for the whole org, but we weren't able to go fully live on Docrio. And I have some customers, right, that have done the migration later, have sort of I see some people in the room just trying to migrate after the fact and what that looks like.
Yeah.
But talk a little bit how new matters, how you have that all set up and they don't have to create the folder structure. But then old, we have a link out to SharePoint for now. So maybe talk a little bit about that.
Okay. Yeah, we house our client files in SharePoint. And so what's happening right now, we've got a kind of a funky hybrid situation. It is working okay. For existing matters, right, that were live in Backdocket, which was our legacy system, our pods are continuing to work out of SharePoint for those files for now. Now they're welcome to, put new documents into Docrio, but we're encouraging them to continue to fully work their SharePoint matters in SharePoint because we will be migrating those over in a few weeks. But we've got the system set up. When a new matter is created in Litify, the system generates the client file folder structure, and then they work from within that. And that's what we're moving to. So yeah, for now, the matters that existed in Backdocket prior to the launch contain a link to the SharePoint folder, which is how it was in our legacy system. And then Banjax will partner with me in the next few weeks to get everything migrated over into Litify, and we'll say goodbye to SharePoint, which will be wonderful.
But they were excited, you see their faces light up, right? When create a new matter and the folder structure is there. So that's
right? An example of a process. Previously we would do an intake. Decision would be accept. We would have an intake person creating file folders inside of SharePoint and then sending the pod an email that says, you have a new matter and here's the link to your folders. And so these are the types of things that we're able to make obsolete now. Just completely, we don't need to dedicate someone's time to that particular type of thing.
So now a couple questions that are not specific. So what surprises you most about your job?
What surprises me about my job? Which job? COO or Litify?
Oh, this surprised me. When I was there for Go Live, Nicole's working, and then all of a sudden she's running upstairs with a defibrillator or something, right? Because somebody was having an incident, right?
That was a medical emergency.
Medical emergency.
That does not always happen.
That was a surprise for me.
That was a surprise, yeah. That's taking care of the team, right?
Yeah.
We had a legal assistant that was struggling that day with blood pressure. But I don't know. Whoever wrote that question, you want to be more specific?
Well, are you surprised by your team? Are you surprised by the way that they embrace the product and the way that it... Because I think, you're your worst critic, right?
Yes.
Are you surprised?
To some extent, I'm surprised, and I also feel like the level of adoption we have already achieved in week 5 is a testimony to our effort. But I also think, just like in any firm, all of you have firms where you have different generations represented in your user group, right? Different levels of tech comfort represented. Dudley DeBosier is no different, and I am very blessed now to be on live, Q&A sessions with my team, and for one of our most seasoned oldest legal assistants to hop on and me force her to share her screen. I mean, even that is still a big deal, right? And she's trying to use Litify terminology to describe her issue, which is what we're encouraging, right? We will be able to help you much more quickly if you can speak back to us in that language. And then kind of telling them, like, they have a responsibility to advocate for themselves in this process, and the best way to do that is to get on board, right? The best way to do that is to learn the terms and to help me help you.
Yeah. And show grace.
And show grace, that's right. There have been days where I think I get a little teary on Zoom, depending on the level of attitude that comes back at me. But in large part, I do think we have been successful, and the team understands, like, this is a partnership, and this is not a finite project, right? This is an infinite game, and we just put a lot of emphasis on that to try to make sure that expectations are set correctly.
Yeah, definitely. And so you touched on it a little bit, but talk about success. Like, what do you, after go live, are people using the system? Are they engaged? Are you back up to speed on where you were before launching Litify? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the next couple of weeks, we will be back up to speed, I think, is how I feel. Now, we are processing intakes. Like I said, we're dispersing. We encountered some hiccups here and there with special functionality for workers' comp, for example. Things like that put us, like, slow down a little bit in certain areas. Obviously, pulling data from the legacy system exposed a lot of sins. That's a strong word, but, it did, and it's kind of funny to be on Zoom now and to have somebody come at me with a certain issue. And I've kind of taken to doing this more in the last couple of weeks now that I'm trying to say, like, all right, stop. Stop, just. So they'll show me something inside Litify, and they're frustrated that a fax number is over here or there. And so I'll get into Backdocket, and I'll say,
where was it?
Well, let's look at what came over from Backdocket. Because quickly it's so easy to suddenly romanticize the old when we're struggling to adopt the new. But yeah, and to your question, I guess, I've been really excited to see, like, across the generations, across the level of experience, we have people adopting the vocabulary and working. And they have been from day one, despite the little hiccups here and there.
Yeah. And just for clarification, somebody asked about why didn't you migrate data before go live? And I may have not been clear enough to say that there was a significant effort for data migration. And maybe you can speak to the amount of years as far as live cases are historical, but it's DocRio files that we haven't done yet.
Yeah, not data.
Data.
Was that the question? Or was it a
It
misconception?
was why didn't you migrate data, but it was data was migrated.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah.
Huge.
So, of course, our data was migrated, but our client files. SharePoint presents us with some interesting issues like throttling and some other things. And so we've chosen to do that post-go live.
And what about Litify were you excited for your team to experience?
There are, a couple different things. Litify and being able to have, like, a certain level of power for customization in my own hands is very exciting, because I think we will be able to iterate and make changes that are meaningful to the users much more quickly than we were able to in the legacy system. So that's one thing. I have a lot of high hopes, right? I know we've already talked about how we're kind of in that transition time where we're living with legacy processes and legacy data inside the powerful world of Salesforce. And so we're going to navigate that as best we can, but we have a future iterations list this long for what happens when I get to, when we get to kind of move out of this phase, and how do we further customize and automate certain things about intake and just expound upon so many things. I mean, a lot of my excitement has to do with, like, making old processes obsolete. I think I'm very excited about that. We're a paperless firm, but there's just so many ways that we can kind of tidy that up and wrap a bow around it. And I think Litify provides us with that opportunity.
Absolutely. Here's a totally different question, but I think really interesting, is about what diversity and inclusion efforts is your firm focused on?
Is this software related, or are we talking about the culture, guys? No, really, that's my question back to you. Who wrote that question? Focus it for me just a little bit. Diversity and inclusion.
Anything that you have towards those efforts, and it's okay if you don't have anything to say on that topic.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very excited. We are onboarding a new vice president of human resources that I think is going to partner with us to bring us up to speed in some of those ways. Yeah. Of course, we have all ethnicities and all generations represented in our user group, which I love, and we have such emphasis on taking care of the team. Yeah. And but I'm excited. I think there's more that we can do.
Great, absolutely. I think that maybe we could talk real quick about some of the KPIs and some of the things that you're looking forward to as far as, once you have time to clear your head, what are some of the next things that you want to focus on with the team?
Yeah.
I know that you said about eliminating some paper and some processes that I know that there was some fields that we wanted to bring over, right? Because you did it that way before and you want to do that. But are there any other initiatives, any other things that you could think of to build on the platform?
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, again, I want to get us out of this like hybrid situation, right, where we're living with legacy processes, legacy treatment of certain things, and move us into the new solutions that we've technically already provided in some ways, but we need to, to point them out to the users and really train on them and let them know what already exists there.
Sure.
But yeah, I do see us, I'm very excited about Litify because I do think it provides us with the opportunity to really defragment our tech situation in general, and then our processes in general in lots of different areas. So for example, I would like to see us build further functionality so that, our runners, requests for runner projects are funneling through the system. We talked about Uber earlier, and I have kind of high hopes for how I want to incorporate that into the org. These things that are requested by clients or requested by our own internal team, one department to another. There's a lot of ways I think that we can make those requests and that collaboration of work, whether it's medical records or whatever it is that we're trying to achieve interdepartmentally. Litify has the power for us to make those things more seamless, right, and take less time and be less paper-driven, right? I don't need to fill out a PDF to request something of my managing attorney. I can click a button in Litify, and that request goes to him, and he responds. And these things are just quicker in general. Other things, Chad's in the room. I have high hopes for generating a medical summary that fulfills his needs and the needs of my attorneys and legal assistants with a click of a button. Yeah. And so I've made some progress on things like that. Obviously, those are more bell and whistle type situations that I'll be working on in the future. But other things, it's very powerful, right? I could technically build an HR platform within Litify, and why would I not do that? And that's down the road, right? But that's where I see us going. I don't need to have a ticketing portal separate for IT. All of this can be built within the org, and that's what I'd like to see us do.
Great. Let's talk, because I know this is so important to your firm, let's talk about reporting.
Yeah.
If we could talk about the reporting functions that you utilize, how you were able to incorporate that into the platform for Go Live, and where you see that going.
Yeah, so we love our dashboards, right? And on our dashboards, we pull all manner of reports right out of Litify. We're in the process right now of kind of refining what columns are on these reports, what time periods are represented, do we have these perfect, do we not? So there's that, and then we had a lot of great reporting in place already through Access, and so what we're trying to do now is to pull all of those things that used to live or were created through Access. We're using Apex class to build those reports, those custom reports, and so that it kind of mimics the power of what we had before, and now we can expound upon it, and that's exciting. And we couldn't go live without having at least parts of that in place, right? Mm-hmm. There's further refinement and creation to be done, but we had to go live with that in place, right? Because we were in a situation with the legacy software where I understand what client to call because my report tells me it's time to call said client, as opposed to having notifications and things like that that we can now have in Litify. So we had to make sure that those things were in place so that business didn't come to a standstill on August 22nd.
How long was the implementation?
We really started working on the discovery process of the org probably April of last year. And so we went live August. So what was that? A year and 4 months, essentially, our build.
Very good. All right, so how involved were the managing attorneys in the implementation process?
Pretty involved to a certain extent because I made them be. We also followed that model of we need to establish a power user group, right? I had attorneys in that group of people, went back and forth quite a bit with our managing attorney, Chris Kaiser, and then our director of legal operations, Chad Lederman, making sure we understood attorneys' needs. Now, as far as getting the attorney buy-in for the training portion, that was a different story, right? And that onus really heavily falls on our legal assistants, which I knew, right? And so, we had to make sure we were accounting for our managing attorney's needs with regard to reporting, right? And so that's been pretty cool. I mean, Chris can call and say, I need these fields created for TBI, and then I need the report generated and stuck on my dashboard. Not a problem. We'll have that done for you in 20 minutes. And that's
awesome.
very, very cool, right? That's not the relationship that he had with our previous situation. So I think he's happy, and I think he trusts, like, we're listening, we're going to provide what he needs.
And they know it's possible, right?
And they know it's possible, yeah.
I think that's a big deal. Because there was a question here about, at the moment with the firm's integration, what's the biggest challenge you're facing among attorney and paralegal users?
We had an interesting accounting situation in our legacy software. Trying to push us into Litify's way of doing accounting has probably been our biggest challenge. And what do I mean by that? We treated everything kind of as a case expense in our legacy system. And now we have the concepts inside of Litify of this is our trust account, this is our operating account. And teaching these concepts to our users who really in our old software weren't responsible for understanding them has been a challenge, right? So our accounting team really bared quite a heavy burden with regard to processing dispersals, right? Because our legal assistants were doing data entry in the legacy system, but the onus really fell on accounting to make sure, because our systems they're not integrated, and they're still not. So right now we're working, we have an accounting software, and then we've got Litify, right? And so Q1 of next year, the next big project will be to move us to an accounting software that integrates with Litify, and then our landscape is going to drastically change with regard to how all of that works. So what we've tried to encourage our user group is that learning accounting in Litify is preparation for when we are fully integrated with an accounting solution within the system. So it's a little awkward, it's a little painful here and there, but it's really just us setting you up for success for that launch in Q1.
Yeah, I think like you're constantly telling a story, right? And helping people understand, why they're doing it, not just we have to do this or we are doing this and get on board, but understanding like
the why.
Why
that's
you're
right.
doing this because it's setting us up for a better experience later when we go.
Something that has been kind of funny since they really have bought into the idea of like, oh, things will be customizable. Like Nicole and Grammer can do this for me, Then when we hit a roadblock of, well, I can't change that recently viewed list view, right? I can't alter the way that looks or add more fields to it. Then it's like jarring, Wait, what? She can't fix that thing. So
why do I have to click on that link? Why do I have to type that in twice? Right?
And I'm like, we are still working within a set of parameters. But there is a lot of power, especially if I take it upon myself to be educated enough to understand all the ways in which I can achieve something, and that's on me. That's my responsibility.
That's great. So this is an interesting question here. I think we're almost to the end here, but this one says platform migration is expensive, both financially and for staff disruption.
Yes.
What sort of ROI considerations to switch twice in 3 years?
I think us partnering with Litify is more than just, getting our firm on a software that can scale, right? There were a lot of considerations. We do have intentions of growing exponentially the operations of our firm and the reach of our firm in various ways. And so while it is expensive and it is painful, right? I'm looking right now at the extra storage we need when we do migrate those SharePoint files in a couple of weeks, right?
Ask Dan.
So that's not lost on me, and it's a great question. But I think when you're a firm that's playing an infinite game, as opposed to the finite game of being on top all the time, you're always on top. Remember, it's a long-term commitment, right? This is for the generations beyond Chad Dudley, beyond James Pelchier, for whoever is here 30 years to come, 30 years from now. And that's important. I think that you have to have that perspective and make sure that's your commitment. That's why you're doing this, because that's when it makes sense.
I was curious about, or wanted to spend some time talking about the importance of the strong team, especially in admin, when it comes to going live. What does that look like for you so that it's not all you?
You're trying to put me in a corner, Carissa. So like I said before, at the very beginning of the talk, we were talking about how did we determine success, or what did I feel were successes in our project? And that was, getting buy-in and partnership from my user base, from Dudley DeBosier. But then it was achieving a partnership with both Banjax and Litify, right? And then it's such a tall order. What I think I see now, a deficit in this way internally, right? The challenge is now on me to make sure that I have beefed up my own capabilities, right? It's possible that I need to hire some people to assist me in all things. I've got someone part-time right now who's able to help me with some of the smaller admin type duties, some report building, some user management. But I do see, there you are. I was looking for the other COO who's the Litify admin. Are you there? Oh, yeah. I was listening to you talk about the level of support you have underneath you, and I don't currently have that in that exact way, right? I'm super excited because Banjax is partnering with us post-go live to provide services, right, which are vital. I absolutely can't do it all. I can't even get to all the tickets that come in. I can't get to all the emails and Teams chats and phone calls. And so these first 4 weeks of being live, and again, we have some power users set up to help me, right? That they're willing to help their fellow teammates do the things that don't require fixes in Litify. Really, they're just training things. But it's a tall order, and my challenge now, I think, is to beef up my internal support.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that was Carissa encouraging me to do so by making me speak to that in front of all of you.
You all heard it. So let's see. This might be one of our last questions about. You mentioned you're anticipating storage issues. Have you found any possible solutions for that yet, besides buying more storage?
Yeah, right now we are planning to buy the storage we need to get our files into Litify. It's not a super wonderful long-term vision. I think you probably were hoping I would be able to speak to. Right now, I need to get us to a stasis and then figure it out. Our SharePoint repository isn't just active client files, it's closed client files, right? So obviously, I'm not planning to migrate our closed client files into Litify. So I'm trying to be selective about that because, yeah, it's expensive and we have a lot of files. So we're going to start with our open and active cases, migrating those over in a few weeks. And then we're going to kind of get our bearings and see where to go from here. I think I would just say for any prospective Litify customers, just do the work. Do the work to get educated about the process and to make sure that, like we talked about, it's expensive and it's financially expensive. It takes time from whatever user or whatever team member you identify as responsible for the project. Just make sure you get fully educated. What does it look like? What is the power of Litify? What can it do? What does it come with? Versus what am I going to have to create for my firm? And kind of really, really learn that on the front end, not during the build, I think, is what I would encourage. And then it's really just making sure, like I said, I naturally kind of take ownership of things I'm responsible for, right? I'm operational. I'm a perfectionist. I want to take ownership of it, dig into the weeds of it, and fully understand it. And that's how I've approached this project. And I think that's that level of ownership and taking that responsibility on as the firm, as opposed to this is all Litify. Build me something, Litify. Build me something, Banjax. That it's important that the firm take responsibility for its needs and then become educated enough to communicate them properly to the vendors that are working with you on the build of your org.
Yeah, and the last thing I want to say, just going back to where it all started for me, with Nicole is the amount of energy that the whole team put into the communication strategy and the training. It isn't just a, train the trainer. Let's train our admin. The admin's going to train the people and make it a one-size-fits-all, right? It's great. The Litify Learning Hub is fantastic, but there's things that are unique to your firm. And I think putting in that time, putting in the training videos, documentation for posterity, really having that and investing that time up front, it really goes a long way for your users to understand why you're making this change. And so with that, if nobody else has any other questions, Nicole, thank you so much. It was like an act of God to get here after Go Live, so thank you for being here today. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thanks, you guys.